Hello everybody. Today my guest is Dr. Michael Scott Doran. He's a senior fellow and the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at the Hudson Institute based in Washington, D.C. He served in the administration of George W. Bush in the National Security Council as a senior director. He was also Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in support of public diplomacy. Dr. Doran, it's great to see you. How have you been?
Wonderful, thanks. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. There are a couple of things I would like to discuss with you. The first thing is the recent attack against Azerbaijani Embassy in Tehran. The view in Azerbaijan is that it's shared by the public officials, and also it's pretty much the sentiment within the Azerbaijani public that what happened on the 27th of January was a terrorist attack. But Iran begs to differ, and they have been making colossal attempts to portray it in the family context. What is your reading of the situation?
Well, I think there's every reason to suspect the Iranian regime is having a hand in this. Obviously, we don't have a smoking gun to prove that they are behind this. But the thing that was really the most telling was how quickly they put this man who had just killed, within hours of this man killing someone at the embassy, they put him on multiple news interviews on Iranian television. I mean, contrasted with the way they have dealt with the protesters in Iran, who are tried in secret. They're not given lawyers. They're not given appeals. They're tried, convicted in secret, and then put to death very quickly. And then this guy, they're putting him, they're interrogating him in public, and with a lot of respect, and then putting him on interviews. At the very least, you have to assume that the regime decided immediately that it was going to use this guy for propaganda value, and it's not a big leap to assume that the decision to use him predated his terrorist attack.
Well, what we can see at this particular stage, that the Azerbaijan does not have any confidence that Iran will conduct proper investigation, and Iranian-Azerbaijani frictions have exacerbated beyond measure, and the region, South Caucasus and the wider region, is getting very complicated. Iran is under mounting pressure from the international community. Iran is very close with Armenia. So given this context, what does the future have in store for Iranian-Azerbaijani relations?
Well, I think that they are going to be tense permanently. I can't. No matter what happens, they're going to be very tense. If only because you now have a strong, vibrant Azerbaijan allied to Turkey. Both Turkey and Azerbaijan, both individually and together, are rising powers. And you have, a third of the population in Iran, in northwestern Iran, concentrated in northwestern Iran, are ethnic Azerbaijanis, and so these are dynamics that are out of the control of governments. There is a rising ethnic Azerbaijani feeling inside Iran. We don't know. It's impossible for me to know. I don't know the Azerbaijani language. I don't know Persian. I've never been on the ground in Iran. It's impossible for me to know if this increasing Azerbaijani awareness or ethnic awareness in Iran is going to have a strong political component, in terms of a desire for autonomy, federal government, independence, some kind of confederation with Azerbaijan. I have no idea, but whatever form it takes, even if it's just a desire for a greater, among young people especially, for a greater connection to their Azerbaijani and Turkish roots, that's a threat to the regime, which doesn't want to, the regime doesn't want to allow Azerbaijanis in Iran to be educated in their own language. It doesn't want them to have a deep connection to their culture historically. And so the regime is going to feel the pressure of the rise of Azerbaijan, even if the Azerbaijani government itself doesn't do anything to try to foster that. But of course, we've seen President Aliyev recently at the meeting of the Turkic Council. He said that we are concerned about the welfare of Azerbaijanis, not just inside Azerbaijan, but outside as well. The implication clearly is for Iran. And so no matter what, we're going to have tension. But then when you add to that the fact that the victory of Azerbaijan in 2020 in the Second Karabakh War, that was a real blow to Iran because it put the entire border of Azerbaijani national territory and Iran under the control of the government of Azerbaijan, and that has cut the influence of it's cut the direct routes that Iran had northward through Armenia off, and so the government in Tehran is very concerned about being shut out of the South Caucasus entirely and having no influence over what goes on there. And that I think is the single biggest factor, immediate factor behind the terrorist attack, is the desire of Tehran to have influence over the South Caucasus. It's particularly fearful of the Zangazur Corridor.
Well, I'll ask you about the future of Iran a bit later. But this question is about these tensions between Azerbaijan and Iran. I remember back in October 2021, I think you wrote an article or posted on your social account that you described the photo of Azerbaijani president patting Israeli-made kamikaze drone as a very defiant message to Tehran. And if memory serves me correctly, you described it as a defiant message worthy of 1,000 foreign policy briefs. So Azerbaijan is very defiant against Iran, in particular after 2020. In the context of this embassy attack and its ramifications and this mounting pressure against Iran, do you think there's any particular role Azerbaijan should play within the process?
Well, there's absolutely definitely an Israeli component to the fears in Tehran. And Tehran has made that explicit in a lot of its messaging over the last year. It has carried out military exercises on Azerbaijan's border, and in carrying those out, its media has complained about Azerbaijan being a base for Zionist influence in the region, and the Iranian government media has said that, and including government officials, have said that this is a completely unacceptable state of affairs. And we can't ignore the fact that some power, and I'm the working assumption is it is the Israelis, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, have just recently carried out drone attacks inside Iran against Iranian, especially drone facilities. And now no one knows exactly how the Israelis are getting their equipment into Iran and where they're operating it from. But if you're sitting in Tehran and you see the Israelis have a strategic relationship with Azerbaijan, and then you see the ease with which the Israelis are carrying out military operations inside Iran, as well as very dramatic intelligence operations, such as spiriting all of the nuclear archive out of Tehran a few years ago. When you see that, it makes you fear even more the Azerbaijani-Israeli relationship. Now, we have no idea. I don't think there's anyone who's talking in front of television cameras who has any real information about what the connection is, the intelligence connection or the military connection between Israel and Azerbaijan with respect to Iran. I don't want to suggest for a second that the Israelis and the Azerbaijanis are cooperating together on these attacks that apparently the Israelis are carrying out in Tehran. But if you're sitting in the government in Tehran, clearly you don't have control over your own territory. You don't know how the Israelis are getting in. And one of the things that's going to cross your mind is that they're getting help from Azerbaijan. So it's just another factor that increases the paranoia and the fear of Azerbaijan when you're sitting in Tehran.
Well, given Iran's deep isolation and the pressure against it, do you believe that regime change is a likely probability in the foreseeable future?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. The Iranian regime is like a ship that's listing over to one side. It's very easy to see that this regime has a much smaller base of support domestically now than it has ever had in its history. I think an analogy to the late Soviet Union is appropriate here. By that I mean that the system is no longer really working well for anyone. There's no one, even people who are working in the system don't really believe in it. They don't believe in the dominant ideology. And one thing that these anti-hijab protests, which are of course anti-regime protests, but focused on the hijab all across the country, one of the things that they show you, it's really remarkable, the extent to which the youth in Iran, and that's all over Iran, has not bought the ideology of the regime. I mean, the regime for the last 50 years, basically, has. Did I exaggerate the length of this? For the last 25 years, I mean 45 years. Yeah. This regime has tried to create an anti-Western culture, a culture hostile to the attitudes of the West, and it has failed. I mean, clearly the young people are facing West, and they want an openness to the West. They don't want to be a kind of Islamic North Korea, and so there's been this just tremendous failure, similar to the failure in the Soviet Union in the 1980s, but there's no guarantee that failure is going to lead to regime change. It means a weakened regime, a hollowed out regime, a regime in which an enterprising power like Israel can penetrate it for intelligence purposes and even military operations to a surprising degree. But a regime that's still quite lethal, and we can't assume that history is just going to wipe it away. I'm also not convinced, by the way, that when this regime goes, we get something that's beautiful afterwards. This thing is going to morph into something else, and we have to think hard and long about what that might be.
Yeah, recently I had a chance to speak to Brenda Schaefer, and she said that in the context of Azerbaijani-Iranian relations, new regime could be potentially worse than the current regime, which has got many problems. And although, yes.
Yes, I was recently in Azerbaijan just 2 weeks ago, and I talked to a number of Azerbaijanis who are familiar with what's going on inside Iran, and they told me that a sentiment among Azerbaijanis in Iran is that the successor to this regime could be a Persian nationalist regime. That's one scenario that I think has to be in our mind, that would be more hostile to the Azerbaijani population, or less responsive to its desire for for a connection to its cultural roots than the Islamic Republic. And that's an interesting perspective, and one that I hadn't really thought much about.
Although the Islamic Republic of Iran, the regime there, is not relevant to the aspirations of Iranian people, but the regime itself is more or less strong. But do you believe that at some point it is unlikely to happen very soon, but even the disintegration of Iran as a nation is one of the probabilities.
That has to be a scenario that we think about. I think having lived through the breakup of the Soviet Union, I think the ethnic question in the Soviet Union was one of the things that was a major driver of the breakup of the Soviet Union. And few observers in the West really were aware of this to any significant degree until it was staring them in the face. I think that there's a potential for the same thing in Iran, but we should be having here in Washington, and we're not, a debate about to what extent is Iran a multi-ethnic nation. Is the analogy to the Soviet Union, where it's sort of Russian domination with the ethnic minorities that feel themselves separate from the Russian nation, or is there is there actually an Iranian nation? There's an argument to be made. A lot of people make it specifically with respect to the Azerbaijani question, is that they say that the Azerbaijanis historically have been very well integrated into the into the government, and that they don't desire independence and to be they really see themselves as part of Iran.
That comes from the argument.
And so I am not in a position to say one or the other,
sure,
but I think we have to have these various scenarios in mind, and we need to test reality against the scenarios.
Yeah, Azerbaijani people played a crucial role in the development of Iranian statehood. That's the reason why that particular sentiment is very palpable. I've got two more questions. One is about Zangazur Corridor, and the last one is going to be about the recent appointment of a senior advisor. So the Zangazur Corridor, I know that you are a great supporter of the Zangazur Corridor, but my question is, how appreciated this idea within the official circles in Washington, D.C.? How important it is to Washington?
That's a fantastic question, and I have to give you an ambiguous answer. It isn't really clear how much official Washington values the Zangazur Corridor. The average person in Washington has never heard of the Zangazur Corridor. However, the administration, the Biden administration, clearly, as a result of the Ukraine war, has, I'm talking at the highest levels, the National Security Advisor, I'm assuming the President himself, the Secretary of State, they clearly have a new appreciation of the value of Azerbaijan to the United States, especially with regards to its role as, I would call it, the cork in the bottle. I'm stealing from Zbigniew Brzezinski here, the cork in the bottle of Central Asia. If you want to create, a vibrant economic highway between Europe and Central Asia that isn't controlled by either Russia or Iran, Azerbaijan becomes essential. And I think that the administration has an awareness of that. To what extent they're focused on it, and to what extent they are developing a strategy based on that is an open question. I've been surprised at the extent to which Mr. Vardanyan in Karabakh, who I regard as a tool of Vladimir Putin, sent to Karabakh to influence Americans in the direction of Russian policy and Armenian policy, very much with an eye to blocking the Zangazur Corridor. I've been surprised at the extent to which he is received among American pundits, as an Armenian patriot, rather than the instrument of Mr. Putin in the South Caucasus, similar to those people who worked for him in Donetsk and Luhansk and South Ossetia, etc.
Well, present juncture within the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process is very important because Moscow format, to be absolutely honest with you, does not seem to be functioning properly. There's a great deal of skepticism about it in Azerbaijan. Brussels format has also lost some credibility, and it looks like that Washington could be proactive at this stage. And there was a new appointment, a new senior advisor for Caucasus negotiations has been appointed. Is this a mere rotation, or does it mark a beginning of a new stage in the proactive US involvement in the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process?
Again, I have to give you pretty much the same ambiguous answer. We can see there's a new appreciation for Azerbaijan. There's a new openness at the highest levels to the Azerbaijani point of view. The National Security Advisor of Azerbaijan has a direct channel to the U.S. National Security Advisor, a channel that's open and being used frequently. But I have yet to see proof that the United States is bringing its power to bear to actually get through all of let's say, to force the Armenians to make a decision. Because what's blocking the peace process here is not Azerbaijani policy, it's the policy of Mr. Pashinyan. He blows hot, he blows cold. He wants to have a meeting with President Aliyev, but then no, he wants President Macron to be part of the meeting and so on. I see him buying time, and I don't see the Americans giving him deadlines so that he can't buy time. And I think that would be the sign of a serious American strategy, is one that was really pushing, trying to make it easier for Pashinyan to make the hard decisions. And I don't want to suggest they aren't very hard decisions. He's surrounded by Russian power. He's got all kinds of elements, the Iranians, the Russians, elements inside Armenian society and politics that want to block him from making an agreement. So it's very hard for him to do. I don't see the United States really helping him in that, and that's what we need to see.
I see. Dr. Doran, thank you very much indeed for your time. I'm most grateful to you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.